guys, what's poppin'? Que es la que hay? Welcome back to my channel. If you're new, my name is Adamaris and I do a little bit of everything on this channel, from beauty to vlogs to lifestyle. So I hope you definitely subscribe and tune into more content. It's been a bit of time and I do apologize, guys. I really do. I need to get it together with my YouTube channel. But if you're not following me on any of my social media accounts, go ahead and do that right now. I'll put the links here. You guys will see it in the bio. You'll be able to see it anywhere. But I am gonna be doing the second episode to the Mob Boss series that I created not too long ago. And I wanted to do this particular person for the longest, but this person is gonna be very intricate. I'm also getting like my brushes ready and everything for you guys because we're doing it all at once. But I wanted to go ahead and share with you guys the story of the person that I'm going to be talking about today. So if you can see from the, or as you can see from the title and, you know, name of the video, we're going to be doing the second episode on Vincent the Chin Gigante, or in Spanish, Gigante. You guys know what I'm saying. So I'm really excited because this is gonna be crazy, absolutely crazy. Because I haven't done a video in so long, I wanted to share with you guys some products that I've just been loving. So throughout the video, while I'm sharing these facts and just this information about this person that we're gonna be talking about, I'm also gonna be giving you guys information on the products, on the stuff that I'm using. Probably gonna be new stuff that I haven't showed you guys in a while, so hopefully you enjoy it. For eyebrow, I've been using this for a while, so it's probably not gonna be a surprise. The Reina Rebelde Rebel Eye Paint for brows and eyes. So Vincent the Chin Gigante, he was the leader of the Genovese family, which was part of the 5 families back in the 70s, 80s, 90s. You get my drift. If you don't know about the 5 families, it includes John Gotti, who was part of the Gambino family, yada yada yada. If you haven't seen the first episode to this series, go ahead and check it out now. I'll go ahead and create the little card up top right here, so that way you guys can check that first video out, because I didn't know this when I first was researching, but after researching some of the main key points of today's speaker or person, L, he actually ties into the first person that I actually ended up doing for this series. So the first person was actually Sammy the Bull Gravano. So go ahead and watch that so you can get a little bit more information on how it all ties in. And then of course stay tuned to this video. Don't hop out just yet. But he was the leader of the Genovese family. If you see me also looking to the side, it's because I took some notes and it is on my iPad, so I just want to make sure that I'm able to bring you guys all of the like facts and make sure everything is good. So Vincent the Chin Gigante, or Gigante as you would say in Spanish, he was, you know, he went by a couple different names. One of the main ones that was probably known was the Odd Father, the Chin, the Real Boss in New York, Vinny Gigante, etc, etc. There were a couple more, but you know, those were like the main ones that he kind of went by. He actually ended up reigning so long as a crime boss because nobody ever used his names. Nobody ever used his name. So whenever speaking about him, he actually kind of ordered that if you did bring his name up, to just point at your chin whenever speaking about him, so that in case that there was wiretaps, he could never be, you know, roped into all the situations, which makes a lot of sense and actually really freaking smart. And he actually, this was a key thing that I kind of learned as well, when you become a boss of a mob, you know, family, you never really stop becoming the godfather. Like, as weird as that sounds, I know it's like, oh, the godfather. No, like, seriously, once you become the godfather, you're legit the godfather forever and ever until you legit die. Even when you go to prison, you literally are still like in power, if that makes sense. So that was a key theory that I learned throughout this research for the chin. But he actually stayed in reign until his death at 77 years old in 2005. In December of 2005, he was 77 years old, and he had basically taken his reign from 1981 up until 2005. And it's basically said that he was one of the last of the older generation who basically was, you know, who believed in like the code and honor, and he was very like old school when it came to the way he handled the mob. For the longest, nobody really knew the mob was the mob until, of course, different things that happened, and obviously at that point everybody kind of knew about the mob. But La Cosa Nostra, or La Cosa Nostra as it's called, they are a secret association. So that's why people really didn't know about them, because they kept that type of information as it was a secret society. So he basically worked as, you know, one of the old mob bosses. That's how he handled his reign, if you will. But I'm gonna go ahead and start on, because these are just the basic things I wanted to let you guys know about. So in the 1920s, his mother and father came from Naples, Italy, over to Manhattan, the Greenwich Village, and that is basically where they took their, where they started their life, basically, because as some of you may know, a lot of Italian immigrants, or even immigrants coming from Europe, a lot of them came through a way of New York, and that is how they were able to start making a living here in the United States. Also, I'm currently using my new favorite sponge in the whole planet. This is a Sonia Kashuk body sponge, but I've been using it for my face after I seen Let's Do Makeup use it, and her makeup looked flawless. And honestly, I think it's been coming out really great with this. But I'm gonna go ahead and move forward. His parents were Salvatore and Yolanda Gigante, and in 1928 Vincent was born. So he was born March 29th of 1928 in Greenwich Village neighborhood, where his parents had actually settled when they made their way from Naples. And he was actually the first of 5 children, so he was the oldest. And also, I'm using the Revolution Conceal and Hydrate concealer. It's been my absolute favorite recently. But he actually lived in a pretty predominant Italian neighborhood. So because the name Vincent, if we're being freaking real, the name Vincent is probably the most common name in all of existence when it comes to the Italian culture. Also, if you hear like snoring in the background, that's Roman. He's sleeping very well right now. But Vincent is a very like predominant, like real, it's like Maria in Spanish. Like, let's be real, Maria is a super like big name. in our culture, and that's the same thing as Vincent. So with a lot of Vincent's being in the neighborhood, his mom already had kind of like a nickname for him, which was Chinenzo, something like that. And I tried to like say it myself, but it just sounds really bad. So basically, the kids in the neighborhood, or just people in the neighborhood, ended up just calling him the Chin, and that's where the famous nickname kind of started from. I'm also going to be using this palette, Soy by NYX. It has all the colors that you need, and I'm kind of just going to do somewhat of a more warm look today to go with my top. I'm not really going anywhere because, let's be real, it's probably like 1:10 in the morning. This video is going up today. I'll be editing it later on today because you guys are everything to me. So as a kid, he actually grew up almost looking up to the mob bosses in that time, such as Vito Genovese and Lucky Luciano. Lucky Luciano is one of the other guys that I want to speak on at a later time, but that video I feel like would end up coming out to like 110 episodes because, let's be real, Lucky Luciano has a story unlike any other. So basically, he started his like criminal journey by taking kids lunch money, which is pretty damn mean, but that's how everything started. He started taking kids lunch money from them, and then from there he dropped out of high school in 1942. He was 15. It was his freshman year of high school, and he ended up going to work for a tailoring man. And then soon after, he actually ended up looking for ways to actually make some fast money. So with that came his journey as becoming a professional fighter, professional boxer, and that's kind of where he started getting his experience with everything at. So a local mobster actually ended up becoming his manager, and that was kind of how he made his way into everything. He actually sold tickets in the neighborhood, and then of course, because his boxing style was really good, he boxed really well, and he hustled by getting his tickets sold. The mobsters really started looking at him like, this kid got some, you know, he got some talent, he got a lot of stuff that we can work with, you know, we need to start molding him immediately. So anyways, by the time he was 21, he actually ended up getting caught in a case that didn't really do good with him. Not do good with him, but it didn't go good for him. He actually got caught for distributing basketball betting cards. So he got caught for doing that, and of course he was put into jail for 60 days. Once he got out, the mob actually started taking him under their wing, and that's when everything pretty much started. So they would use him as a bookie, a chauffeur, a bodyguard for like big mafia people, like elite members as they would say. At 29 is when he actually received the assignment of a lifetime, and that was for the assassination of the boss at the time, Frank Costello. Now, he was actually 29. He had just married his wife Olympia. They actually ended up having 5 kids, if I'm not mistaken. And because he was starting to create his own, you know, family at this point, he actually started coming up with money in different ways that he needed to, whether that was grand larceny, shoplifting, he was an enforcer. However he could make this money, he was making this money. So he was hustling his way through. But the beginning of his actual like mob life didn't start until Vito Genovese, which ties into Frank Costello. Vito Genovese actually took him under his wing, and he actually started mentoring him. So what ended up happening was he kind of had him he kind of took him in and had him be his chauffeur. Or what he ended up doing was he would take him in, and if somebody needed to get beat up for being late on payments on something, that's what he did. So that's kind of where it started with Vito Genovese. Now the whole thing with Vito Genovese was he wanted to take Rain. He was actually put on an assignment to go ahead and kill that boss at the time, Frank Costello, in order for Vito Genovese to be able to step up and become the new boss of the family. But the problem was that when when Gigante, honestly, I'm just gonna call him the Chin, because when you say Gigante, it just sounds really like So when the Chin went to kill Frank Costello, he actually ended up meeting him at his apartment. As he was about to open his door, he came from behind, and before he shot at him, he left him a message, and he said, "This is for you, Frank." And won't you know it, he shoots him and misses. Doesn't kill him. Nope, he doesn't kill him, and he lives. He goes to the hospital, ends up coming out a couple hours after getting it admitted, and at that point the police is looking for the person who did this, because if we're being real, Frank Costello actually had a lot of connects in the politician world, so he was very well known, and that is one of the reasons why Vito Genovese wanted him gone, because a lot of people were noticing that their money was coming up short. And that is because he was making a lot of money because of the politicians being on their end and making more money on that end. So obviously this became a threat, a big threat. So when you start making more money and some people start losing money, that's a problem. So at that point, after Frank Costello gets out of the hospital, the police is basically working on a case to find the person who shot him, and obviously they gotta make some sort of arrest. So the problem begins when they actually, I'm just gonna like fix the corners a little bit. So what ends up happening is Vito ends up taking Vincent. Basically he takes the Chin and he takes him to a hideaway up in upstate New York to kind of kill time. And in that time, the Chin, Gigante, whatever, you guys know what I drift, he actually packed on a couple pounds so that way he could kind of distract them from the fact that they were looking for someone of his stature. He was a very tall man, he was slim, whatever, so he gained a lot of weight, and then eventually he ended up making his way back to New York, or back to, you know, Manhattan area, and he actually ended up just turning himself in. So anyways, he didn't end up getting convicted by the charges. He actually had a good lawyer and he was able to make his way out. It wasn't until later on the media started noticing that Gigante was always with Vito, and the media started getting in there, and so did the feds. So this kind of put him in the forefront. So what ended up happening is Vito and the Chin actually ended up getting arrested for a heroin trafficking case, and what ended up happening was he ended up getting sent for 7 years. Now in the 7 years he was actually a really model inmate, which is crazy. He even like signed up for like educational programs. Like he was really like a model inmate. Because he was such a model inmate and he did so well, he actually got out in 5 2 years is 2 years, you know, especially in jail. Are you kidding me? So after he left prison in 1964, he actually ended up becoming a capo in the mob because he was able to make some more money. He was actually able to move his family from the Greenwich village where he ended up growing up over to New Jersey, to this town called Topanga. I thought about Topanga, but he moved them out and was able to move them into a house in New Jersey, and I thought that was really cool. So anyways, in 1969, he was actually arrested in New Jersey, which was where his family lived, and that's when the whole crazy act started. Now, I literally just told you guys why I was completely obsessed with this character, and that is why. He was smart as hell. So what he ended up doing was, after he got arrested, was he actually put himself in a psychiatric mental hospital. And you might be wondering why. Well, what his strategy was for the next, I would say maybe 30 years, was pretending to be literally mentally insane. And this saved him. And it saves him every single time, and I think that's the most craziest, amazing, funniest thing ever. What ended up helping him in coming to his case was that his brother, he was actually a priest, and when he got arrested, he actually visited him. No, he actually just claimed that his brother was mentally ill. He was paranoid schizophrenic, and that he had issues. So when it came time for his lawyers to basically go into court and prove this information with physical evidence, they were able to. And guess who came out? Vincent the Chin. He was able to come out with no issues as far as the law was concerned, and that was like the absolute beginning to him creating this facade of being mentally ill. And I thought that was the coolest thing ever. I know that sounds crazy, but you guys know I'm totally into mob stuff, so yeah. After that situation actually occurred, his marriage was actually not doing the greatest. So soon after that, he actually stopped making a lot of trips out to New Jersey and just actually ended up getting a mistress in the city, and her name was the same name as his wife. Isn't that weird? But it made a lot of sense, because if you think about it, this man was mentally ill, right? So in the case that he would be brought in for questioning about just anything, if they asked him the name of his lover or his wife, he technically wasn't wrong. He actually literally mapped out every single thing that you can think of. He started kind of bringing attention to himself when it came to these next things. So he actually ended up putting a hit out on John Gotti, who the hit ended up killing one of his lieutenants, and obviously not John Gotti, but he did it in connection to Paul Castellano's murder. Like I mentioned earlier, he was very, very smart in the sense, whoa, that was a lot of powder. He was very much old school when it came to his ways, and obviously if you don't know about the whole situation with Paul Castellano, John Gotti kind of orchestrated this whole thing alongside Sammy the Bull in order to be able to kind of get reign over the Gambino family. And this is pretty much something that can't be done. The only way that you can do something like this in the mob world is if you get an okay for it. If you don't, then that's not okay. So with him doing that, it literally created a plethora of uncertainties when it came to how they viewed him. And if we're being real, some people didn't care, but Gigante was pretty much big on like what it entailed. He went after John Gotti, and it didn't go through the way that he probably expected it. So after they started kind of seeing that there was something wrong with this guy, that there was a lot of uncertainties in his, you know, little story, what they ended up doing was circling him. So he pretty much had the same routine during the day. What he would do is he would literally in a bathrobe walk around the streets of New York alongside someone. It could have been a friend, it honestly could have been a really high-ranking member of the mob. And what he would end up doing is he would actually end up just walking around acting fucking crazy in a robe with his slippers. Sometimes he would urinate in like legit public to keep the act of him being crazy. Ugh, he was so freaking smart. He did something that nobody has ever even thought of doing. All the while, this man is orchestrating a whole mob family, bringing in millions of dollars. So then in 1986 they actually ended up bringing him back in alongside some other mob bosses, but obviously with his little tale of being psycho, mental illness, what, he was able to get out of jail. And they actually ended up getting another person from the same Genovese family arrested as if he was the boss. So he still was literally taking reign and making the world think that he was not as sane as he was. So of course, with the attempted hit on John Gotti and then 6 other hits inside the mob, the feds were onto him. The FBI started thinking that he was conducting a business outside of a nearby store. So like I said, during the day he was seen walking around New York City, but at nighttime is when they actually started paying attention to his, you know, movements. He would come out of his apartment, he would walk to that, you know, place. Sometimes he would be seen getting into a cab. So he was literally playing this shit out like a fluke, and people were literally falling for it. Also, I'm using the Essence Lash Princess mascara. It's my fave. I love this mascara. I haven't been able to use another one, and for the affordability on it, I think it's so worth it. So Essence, you did something right. So during the day-to-day, what would end up happening is they noticed that he obviously lived with his mom, but at night what he would end up doing is he would backtrack out of like a back door from the apartment, and he would actually get in the car and go visit his mistress along with his kids. So he had 2 families. At this point, they were pretty much catching on to his ass. So what ended up happening is they actually ended up suspecting the family of bedridden and construction jobs and extortion and a bunch of other legal jobs, that at this point they started to think they needed to build a case against this guy again, but they needed to build a solid case. So at that point they started to build a case against him and tried to take him down. They actually ended up being able to build a case because they got an informant to go in basically, and they were finally able to catch them saying his name on tapes, not necessarily his like government name, but just the chin. And that was a big deal because that's literally what he's been trying to avoid for like the longest. So in May of 1990 he was indicted on racketeering charges. Of course, his attorney tried the whole mentally ill thing, and the judge basically had it to where psychiatrists would have to be brought in, and they would have to confirm whether or not he would be mentally fit to be able to proceed in like a whole trial. So that's how that started. And then with the psychiatrist, they observed him for 24 hours, and they were convinced that obviously he was crazy. He had paranoid schizophrenic, schizophrenic, whatever, psychotic. They said he was like regressing, and he was childlike, and he would say a lot of stuff like God this, God that. Like, he was just psycho in the head. Like, he just said a lot of weird stuff. So the prosecution, what they ended up doing was they ended up showing the jury and everyone else that there was actually a couple different versions of Vincent that nobody had ever seen, and they were able to capture it. One of the things that they also ended up bringing up was the fact that he was able to maintain relationships for an extended period of time, and apparently with like paranoid schizophrenia, you're kind of more secluded, like you don't want to be with a lot of people sometimes, and that wasn't the case with him. So they were able to tie that into it. And a couple other like key things that I guess ties into those specific illnesses that obviously he just didn't meet. So then they explained how there was different versions of Gigante. So basically the one who lived with his mother, the one who ended up escaping and being with his family, both of his families. He spent a lot of times in the Upper East Side. And then of course the one who had regular meetings with a lot of higher up people in the mob. So then when they finally brought him into court in August of 1996, Brooklyn's court judge determined he was actually lucid and could withstand a full-on trial. So the first day in court, he still was keeping up the act. Like, he was definitely not gonna cut the act, just because he was, you know, they finally caught on to his shit. So while that first day in trial, they actually brought him in, and he literally acted as if he was still mentally ill. He kind of had the shakes at some point, whether that came from his arms or just kind of like his leg twitching every now and then. He did a couple different things that still made him seem as though he was not seen in the midbrain. And one of the things that really drove the case was they brought in Sammy the Bull Gravano. And like I said before, I'm gonna put the video up top so that way you guys can see that video, because obviously I've spoken about Sammy the Bull before, so this is not gonna be something new. Anyways, so Sammy, little Sammy boy, he actually ended up stating that he discussed killing, like the Gigante would be seen discuss killing informants and sharing like extortion profits without any signs of like mental illness. The star witness was actually Peter Savano. He was shooting through a television. He wasn't actually there. He was actually on witness protection, and he actually ended up discussing how anything from Gigante dealing with homicides, the window industry, local 580, and everything in between basically. And at this point, the jury didn't need anything else to legit commit him to everything that he was basically proven of. So at this point, he was found guilty and sentenced to 12 years. But even from prison, he still conducted business like nothing ever happened, like he was never taken off of the streets, because as a boss, that's still what you do. And he still kept the act of being mentally ill. He literally didn't change anything. And then so for the next couple of years after that, he actually was being very like closely monitored, because they wanted to see if at any point he would end up breaking that kind of like facade, like seeing if he acted a different way, kind of listening in on his calls, hearing maybe who's coming to visit him, or seeing how he acts with his inmates or by himself in his cell, whatever. And it wasn't until 9/11 that other inmates, they obviously noticed what was going on, and he was from New York, so they kind of told him like, hey, blah blah. They pointed it out to him, and he ended up going to the phones and calling back to New York to make sure that his family was good and that everyone was safe. So they figured at that point, the feds, sneaky ass mother, they figured that at that point they should target his family, because legit that is the way that they're gonna end up getting him. So they ended up going after the son. That son, his name is Andrew. They actually ended up going after him, and he was actually the one who would go on the street and then deliver any message that Gigante had for his family, for the mob family, not his actual family, his mob family. And he was actually taken in to custody, and then they went against any other family members who obviously like kept up with the facade that he had mental issues when he didn't. So at that point, what he ended up doing was he ended up turning himself over and pleading guilty, and that added on 3 more years for obstruction of justice. And then for his son, it actually allowed him to be able to get out in 2 years than whatever they were trying to do. Meanwhile, this was not a man who was inside the mob. He had no affiliations as far as like being part of the mafia, but his father kind of like put him in a situation where he probably shouldn't have been in, and that's the only thing that sucks. But his father basically took that for him. Like, he wanted to make sure that he didn't have to worry about that. And then of course, after serving like the 12 years for racketeering and then 3 years for obstruction of justice, he was supposed to come out in June 28th of 2010, but sadly he actually ended up passing away in December of 2005, and it didn't really specify what exactly he ended up dying of, but they say he had heart disease. Like, he had a heart disease, so he had maybe some heart issues, maybe he had a heart attack, not really specified anywhere. So that's pretty much how his story went. Honestly, I think it's crazy how he was able to play a mental man and literally walk out of jail each and every time, and they literally would try to catch him every time, and he would never ever stay there for as long as he could. He would literally make it out within hours. He would check himself to mental institutions. Like, this really worked in his favor time and time again. Like, I read somewhere that it literally was 30 years of this whole facade that he was able to keep up without him being put into jail for whatever reason. And then I did read, or hear in this documentary I did watch, that had he waited before going to trial just 4 more months, he probably would have stayed out the whole time. He probably wouldn't have even had to do that time that he ended up doing of the 12 years. Crazy. This guy was smart as hell. Alright guys, so I didn't end up being able to close out the video. I wanted to show you guys literally all the research that I ended up doing on this, because I legit wanted to make this as intriguing as possible for you guys, so that way you can learn a little bit more about mob. Anyways, I wanted to go ahead and thank you guys so much for tuning in. I hope you guys definitely enjoyed. If you want to go ahead and see maybe another episode of the mob boss, let me know of anyone that you want me to go ahead and speak on down in the comment section down below. I definitely want to do one of Lucky Luciano, but that one I feel like would be so extensive. It would take a while. But if you guys want to see anyone else, let me know in the comment section down below. And then of course, if you enjoyed the look along with the video, let me know. Like the video, subscribe, and of course hit the little bell so you get notified whenever I post a video. And thank you so much for tuning in. I will see you guys in the next video. Bye.